Bob Wettemann is a graduate of Texas A&M University with a master's in history in 1995, doctoral degree in history from 2001, and he is a scholar that I admire very much and someone that I actually served with on the battlefield at New Orleans. I met him actually reenacting the battle about 15 years ago. And he is currently the director of the United States Air Force Academy's Center for Oral History. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Bob Wettemann.
Thank you for that introduction, Marty. As I teach military history at the Air Force Academy, and as I've taught American history over the course of the last 15 or so years, when it gets to the Battle of New Orleans, and we've heard the myths, right? At our break from lunch, I came in and there was Johnny Horton singing the Jimmy Good Flute. And what do we get, right? Cotton bales, alligators, squirrel rifles. Not only in the 1960s, but if we go all the way back, out there if you picked up a copy of The Hunters of Kentucky, right? Again, that same myth. So we have that myth at play. Now, there's another set of myths that we deal with too that, as a historian, I find to be a little bit more disconcerting because these are myths that are commonly seen in high school textbooks and in college textbooks, that the battle doesn't matter, that it made no difference since peace has already been negotiated, or that it had no military or diplomatic significance. This is what we are seeing today in our current textbooks. Now, historians always recognize that there is a big problem asking, what if? Right? Pulitzer Prize-winning historian David Hackett Fisher, in his book Historians' Fallacies, said, don't do it. Because what if questions, quote, prove nothing and can never be proven by the empirical method. You don't have the evidence. You're guessing. We're playing a parlor game. Well, step into my parlor. Because there are those instances in history, an antecedent event, where if you change the antecedent, all the consequences change. And certainly, the Battle of New Orleans is one of those instances, one of those antecedents, where you change it, and everything that happens afterwards looks dramatically different. And to illustrate this point, I'm going to jump to Hollywood a little bit. If I can help get some technological assistance. There we go. Anybody know this movie? It's the 1990 Touchstone Pictures film, Mr. Destiny, in which when he was in high school, state championship baseball game, bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, they were behind. Guess what he does? Strikes out. And he thinks that that's the point in his life where everything went wrong. Until he meets Michael Caine, Mr. Destiny, who says there are events in your life that happen a certain way for a reason. But if you get to one event and you change that event, everything that happens afterwards. In the case of Jim Belushi in this film, instead of living a humdrum life as a mid-level executive in a company where he was never going to go anywhere, instead of striking out in the bottom of the ninth in high school, hits the home run, marries the prom queen, becomes the vice president of her father's company, lives in a mansion, instead of building model cars, has a fleet of them in his garage. But then as he meets Mr. Destiny, then he has to reconcile his old past with his new present. And as they say, hilarity ensued. if we were to look at the Battle of New Orleans from this perspective, as this is wrapping up, jump to my next slide. One of the things we look at, if we think about what happened 200 years ago yesterday, and as you consider that battle, and as historians noted, that just about everything that could have gone wrong for the British did. That is what Karl von Clausewitz, military theorist, would call the fog and friction of war. And as we think about that fog and friction of war, on the 8th of January 1815, what potentially could have gone right for Great Britain, whether it be the physical fog, whether it be Thornton, as Dr. Chapman spoken of already, Renee in support of the redoubt, ladders and fascines, or the movement of the 93rd Highlanders. If we were to change one, two, perhaps all, recognizing that there were just slim chances all the way across, how does that change? Not only, here's our antecedent event, right? The 8th of January, the outcome of the Battle of New Orleans, but then all of those events that follow. Recognizing the fickleness of the weather in this area, and I'll just say thank you for having this nice, wonderful, warm weather for me. It's great. I left Colorado Springs, it was 12 degrees and snowing. Came down here in shirt sleeves and everything. Aren't you cold? No, not at all. Love it. Camped out last night, camping out again tonight. But here's our fog. There's the fog that was there on the 8th of January as the British troops stepped off. What if it stays low? What if it doesn't lift? What does that change? Is that enough to affect the outcome? Do the British get closer? Do they crush the attack? Do they drive it home? If Thornton had the boats where he needed them at the right time, didn't have to worry about the canal, the levee, the dam, consider the current. He certainly had the intestinal fortitude to carry out the attack. Does he make it on time? Capture the guns? Turn the guns? How does that affect Renee? They took the redoubt as it was, even under fire. Do they take it? Do they hold it? On the other side, if Mullins got the ladders and fascines up, does the attack press? Notice what I haven't said. I haven't even brought up any dead generals yet. I'm not even going to throw that one out there, but we could. Instead of going to the far side, the 93rd backs up Renee. What does that do? Does the line roll up? Jackson had constructed the defense in depth. Does his health allow him to conduct a retrograde action? He had not been in good health. Suffered throughout much of the Creek campaign. Still suffering. Can he move to the next two lines? Or do the British roll into the city? Beauty and booty. Here they come. Here they come. Change any one of these events. As I said, an alternate outcome to the Battle of New Orleans becomes a distinct possibility. And then, when news of the treaty again arrives, the British flag flies over New Orleans, and perfidious Albion controls the mouth of the mighty Mississippi River. It's that important idea of contingency that many ignore when considering the Battle of New Orleans. An American victory is a foregone conclusion, despite the fact that the British seem to snatch defeat from the very jaws of that victory. Is there another outcome possible? Certainly with the battle, yes. Then what? Then what? Terms of the treaty again, status quo ante bellum. The British had attacked the American coastline previously, but everything else, those raids in the east, had not been designed to take and hold territory. New Orleans was different. Major General Robert Ross, who Pakenham succeeded following Ross's death at the Battle of North Point, had instructions from Lord Bathurst: obtain a command of the embouchure of the Mississippi so as to deprive the back settlements of America their communication with the sea. Subsequent orders dictated that he should occupy some important and valuable possession, by the restoration of which we may improve the conditions of peace, or which may entitle us to exact its cession as the price of peace. Those orders, as well as the orders that Pakenham received from Lord Bathurst on the 24th of October, 1814, instructing him to proceed until you have official information that the President has ratified the treaty. Simply carrying out the campaign. Continue moving forward until you hear something definitive. So if we think about the treaty again, and the original terms that the British brought to the table, uti possidetis, as you possess, knowing well and good that Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams were able negotiations, able to turn that around, status quo ante bellum. Does status quo ante bellum mean anything in 1815? Would the British have respected it if the Union Jack flew over downtown? They did it the last time, 1783, Treaty of Paris. The Northwest Territory granted to the young republic. Yet Great Britain held on to Carlton Island, Oswego, Niagara, Detroit, Michilimackinac. Why? They're hoping to create a buffer zone, maintain that middle ground between Great Britain and the Americans. They certainly coveted that territory, well, what they call Upper Canada, north of the Great Lakes. Now, granted, they gave this back in 1796, but what's to say that in 1815 they wouldn't do the same thing? Do they have the argument? Absolutely. What is the argument? Right? We heard that earlier. The exchange from Spain to France. Then Napoleon pulling a quick one. Well, would Great Britain have given it back? Might they have wanted? In addition, if we're thinking about this Treaty of Ghent, does Great Britain claim New Orleans for their own? They were concerned with the native population too at Ghent. They had thought about this buffer zone in the Old Northwest. What was to keep them from taking advantage of the fact that I think it would be safe to say that there might be some disgruntled Creeks who gave up 23 million acres at the Treaty of Fort Jackson that might have listened to British ministers saying, hey, we'll help you out. We've got New Orleans. They can't do anything to the north because they've got to come through us. Then we take into account the Hartford Convention. They published their final report 200 years and 3 days ago, 6 January 1815. They were upset, didn't like Mr. Madison's war. Under the leadership of Harrison Gray Otis, they're trying to restore the place of New England. What happens at the Hartford Convention? They walk into Washington, D.C. Here's our convention. And then what happens? Everyone laughs at them. Ha ha! Hartford, New Orleans, Trump you. As Winfield Scott said, the grievance deputies became a fine subject of jest and merriment to the men of all parties. The grievance deputies are lampooned because the United States holds New Orleans. Do they get respect if Great Britain does? If they do, what does that do to the Treaty of Ghent? Treaty of Ghent was a done deal almost as soon as it arrives in the United States. We ratified by the Senate because of this great victory. If Great Britain holds New Orleans, what do the British have? Earl of Liverpool writes to Lord Castlereagh, if President Madison should refuse to ratify the treaty, we must immediately propose to make a separate peace with New England. And we have a good reason to believe that they will not be indisposed to listen to such a proposal. The possibility is certainly there. And without the Treaty of Ghent, what does this American eagle, in fact, look like? And here's where we really start playing the parlor games. What happens next? The antecedent has changed. And now all of those events that were based upon an American victory on the 8th of January, 1815, must also be considered. Is New England a strong trading partner with Great Britain? They were before, certainly would be now. Is the South now in a colonial relationship with Great Britain, exporting sugar and cotton? Are both the northern states and the southern state two different countries, which Great Britain keeps intentionally in a somewhat of a neo-colonial relationship because it's to their advantage to keep them down? I mean, the argument can be made that here's where the United States starts rising and the sun starts to set on the British Empire. Because now we've got that in the way from sea to the Mississippi. And that's as far, potentially, as the United States gets. 1815 to 1845, most historians recognize it as a market revolution. Change in the nature of economic relationships in the United States. Movement away from trading with people you know, to conducting commerce over greater distances. Enhanced greatly by a transportation revolution. Roads, river improvements, canals, railroads, aided by a revitalized U.S. military that has reformed significantly after the War of 1812. Does that happen at all? Adams who? The Adams-Onís Treaty, prompted by Jackson's invasion of Florida. Does Jackson even go? Can he? Is there a first Seminole War? The southern boundary of the Louisiana Territory gets divided between perhaps Great Britain and Spain. Monroe Doctrine? Why? Gone to Texas? Does it happen at all? Is there an age of Jackson? His star began to rise following his success at New Orleans. But without that victory, does it happen? The successful outcome at New Orleans unleashed great optimism in the young republic. Headlines touted the glorious news of an almost incredible, unparalleled, splendid victory that signified clearly the rising glory of the American Republic. In the absence of that victory on the 8th of January, 1815, a nation would be forever changed. Perfidious Albion had motive, desire, precedent, and ability to take and hold New Orleans. And throughout the Gulf campaign, the potential for British victory was a distinct possibility. To regard the Battle of New Orleans as insignificant ignores the possibility of contingent events. And in my eyes, represents, I think, a disingenuous interpretation of the American past. There are always numerous paths that the future can take. And in ascribing significance, we need to think of all possible outcomes. Thus, we have no conclusion but to consider contingencies that the Battle of New Orleans becomes one of, if not the seminal event in American history. For without it, our nation as we recognize it today probably doesn't exist. Thank you.
Any question and answer? All right, we have a few minutes for question and answer if anybody would like to.
Isn't it a distinct possibility that British had won, that on our way coming here that we would have passed by a branch of the Bank of the United States? Because if Jackson wasn't here, the chances of him becoming president would be substantially diminished. And then you're looking at either Henry Clay or John Quincy Adams, both of who would have favored the Bank of the United States and would have been recharged. So I think that is a very distinct possibility of something that's going to happen.
Well, and in the aftermath of the War of 1812, the Republicans out-federalized the Federalists. So we have them jumping onto that, but who's to say that the Federalists would not have just taken their own pro-economic platform and pushed that into play? I mean, if we go with your contention, Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams, well, the treaty that they just negotiated wasn't worth anything. So does that mean their star flock sinks? So, again, this is one of those yes, but no. Perhaps. It's great about Q&A, I can't get it wrong. Sir.
Thank you. First of all, in fairness to David Hackett Fisher, he does describe his approach to historiography as graded contingency, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a different notion of contingency.
Well, he brought that, I'm speaking specifically of historians' fallacies, but in his later works, he's done much better, and again, restoring the notion of contingency that is so important, and I would agree with him in that regard.
Thank you. And the what-if question that's maybe most interesting to me is, what about enslaved Americans? How do they fit into the what-ifs?
Right. Right.
In your view?
challenge. Another challenge. It certainly, if you have a North and South in 1815, the division that evolves over the course of the next 45 years, does it really, or do you simply have two countries? One that accepts slavery and one that does not. Again, it's one of those gambles. Who knows? Who knows? Sure.
During the Ghent negotiations in October and November, what was the policy of Liverpool? Was it to renege on any deals? Was it going to hold on? Did he intend to hold on to New Orleans, knowing that there was an expedition going on?
If you consider all those orders that are coming through in late October, keep pressing, keep pressing, keep pressing, you get the best you can. In my sense, Great Britain had pulled one over on the United States before. They're certainly going to do it again. There's nothing in my mind that strikes any change from that. Sure.
I'm curious about what you feel would have been the military response. I'm under the impression that we were preparing another invasion of Canada with that military force had been turned south. Would Britain have actually been able to get beyond the New Orleans area? Could it even have reached Baton Rouge? And would Louisiana then have automatically fallen to them?
In holding New Orleans, you controlled the interior of the continent. Did it matter if they held Baton Rouge or not? I mean, again, it's the parlor games. Certainly the United States military had not, even by the end of the war, evolved to such a state where they could really do anything significant. So.
Thank you. The two other issues that you might want to throw into the thinking here is that the policy in London changed dramatically when Napoleon escaped from Elba. And much of what we see written and much of what we see underway between December and April disappeared in the British mind as they refocused back at Waterloo.
I just want to ask a question about the dispatch that you quoted, the one from Bathurst to Ross, instructing him to take command of the embouchure of the Mississippi and on and on. The rest of that dispatch instructs him as to what to do to try and gauge whether Louisianians and New Orleanians are willing to return to the governance of Spain. And the final part of that same letter says, you will instruct the people that they are not to put themselves under the command of Great Britain. Spain is the option. So how would that fit into your thinking?
That's a great question, and it's one, unfortunately, we really don't have to deal with because of what happened. But again, once you change the first one, everything else changes after. And it's again, this is the joy of the parlor game, and it's one to probably better with a cocktail or two.
Repeat the question
You repeat. You have a microphone.
on the microphone.
The question was about the extent, let me make sure I get this right, the subsequent portion of the letter to Ross, where the orders were not to place yourself under British influence, to the people of Louisiana and New Orleans.
To offer them to go back to Spain.
To offer them to go back to Spain in lieu of, or instead of, the British Crown.